Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay, this is better.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we can start now, but
Okay.
I don't want to delay any minutes because time is so precious, and I appreciate your attendance today, Doctor, for being with us for our second GSC talk by the Graduate Student Club of School of Business and Economics for UPM. Okay, our GSC talk today will talk about artificial intelligence and blockchain application in Islamic digital economy. Okay, so to all participants, so I would like to introduce you guys our speaker today, Dr. Haziq Muhammad, who is the Managing Director of Stellar Consulting Group in Singapore. Is it correct, Doctor?
Yep.
Okay. Before we start, I would like to ask all participants to mute yourself first. If you guys have any question throughout the session, you can write it in the chat box and we will read it during the Q&A session. So before we start, I would like to invite Rahim to recite Surah Al-Fatihah.
Thank you, Shafiza. Assalamualaikum, Doctor. So before we proceed, our event today, I would like to invite all Muslims to recite together Ummul Kitab Surah Al-Fatihah. A'udzubillahi minasyaitonirrajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Arrahmanirrahim. Maliki yaumiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim ghairil maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin. Amin. Oh Allah will bless and guide our event today and run smoothly and achieve the objective, inshallah. Back to you, Shafiza.
Okay, thank you, Rahim. Without any delay, I would like to invite Dr. Haziq Muhammad to deliver his speech. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that kind introduction and for the nice and most appropriate Surah Fatihah to be written before we start. So like in anything, before we start, I would like to say Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello to everyone that's present today.
Assalamualaikum.
Today's talk will last probably until 4:30. Usually, I would like to have a more engaging type of presentation. So what I will do today is I probably will be speaking for about 45 minutes to 1 hour. And then I leave the rest of the time for questions and answers. I think I've spoken on this topic for for a while now, since 2016. I've since then written 2 books on this particular topic in various aspects and various sectors of the economy. So after a while, these things come so easy for me that I sometimes overlook what may be gaps in understanding on the particular topic. So I usually like to receive questions that I can address directly. But for today's talk, I will just be covering these topics. When you talk about AI and blockchain, what happens is that a lot of non-tech people are very interested, especially when our economy is going through a digital transformation or a revolution, which is called now IR 4.0. So you see many ways of doing things are changing because of new technology being adopted, especially when mobile is so pervasive and things like that. So I think before anything else, especially for the non-technologists, I would like to lay some kind of foundation for the technologies that we are speaking about or that are building the basis for the digital transformation of our economy. And there are several, but I will cover only two of them today, artificial intelligence as well as blockchain. There are ways to find out more about the rest once you get interested, and we will discuss this at the end of today's talk. But let me start with these fundamentals today. So for today's talk, we will be covering why digital disruption is important and why it's actually happening today. And then we'll discuss what is AI, how big data is related to AI, and what is machine learning and deep learning. Then we move on to another type of technology, which is the blockchain. Very misunderstood until today. I'm quite surprised after many years of trying to clarify these technologies. Still, it's being misunderstood and often confused with Bitcoin. Now getting more popular because Bitcoin is gaining its price again. It was popular in end of 2017, or was it 2018, something like that. And then when it crashed, it didn't become popular. Now it's popular again because of its value is coming up and reaching new highs. And then after that, we'll be talking about when we combine these two technologies together, when we choose to find applications that utilizes AI plus the blockchain. So what happens then? What do you call this new type of integration or interoperability, right? So then we look into the different applications of technology. I think this is the fastest way to the uninitiated to quickly understand how technology can be useful and in what way and for what reasons, okay? And then, of course, before I end the talk, I typically talk about the limitations of digital technology, and then we'll open it up for questions. Okay, so why is digital disruption important? It is important because it will create better, faster, and cheaper services, as you have already seen. Back in the day, when you want to do simple transfer of funds to someone overseas, or whoever that needs the money to pay for something and things like that, it's usually there is some kind of bank fees that's being charged, or still some banks are charging fees, but it is much less than what was before. So having alternative payment systems, having different ways like tokenizations, through blockchain systems will impact the monopoly of banks charging financial transactions, right? So when you have other competitors coming in the form of fintech companies, it will disrupt the industry. And when you have many competitors, as you know in economics, the price will start to come down, right? When the supply curve shifts to the right. So digital disruption will shrink the bank's role, obviously, because now they are not the dominant player anymore. There are many small players doing specific things in the specific areas of their expertise. So the dominance of banks will shrink. So this will also shrink its role in the economy, especially in the financial sector. AI and predictive analytics, along with sentiment analysis, along with all these other tools that come with AI and big data, will be key to understanding and improving the use of information as we collect them. We had data from before, right? It's just that it wasn't collected like it is today. Today we have social media, everything is being datafied, right? Your professional network is being datafied by LinkedIn. Your social network is being datafied by Facebook. So things that we used to do without taking data from the things that we do are now being transformed or being datafied, right? So that's why there is a sudden abundance of data, which we call as big data. Okay, so how big data plays into AI is that it is the fuel to AI, right? Just like the gasoline or petrol is the fuel to a non-moving car, right? the car can only move when you put fuel into it, just like an AI module. When you actually built it, it doesn't function if it doesn't have any data. Okay, so that's why big data is the fuel to AI. Then we will be talking about blockchain. Blockchain is a relatively new technology that was founded by this guy whose true identity is still not known. He uses the pseudonym of Satoshi Nakamoto. So he built the Bitcoin based on the underlying technology, which we call as the blockchain, or more specifically, the proof of work 256 blockchain protocol. Okay, so he designed and built this, and then made it official at the end of 2008 or early 2009, depending on which paper you are reading. So he published a white paper on the Bitcoin where he described, how he solved the double spend problem and things like that. So that gave birth to the Bitcoin. And interestingly, it happened in the end of 2008, 2009, right after the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis in October. Okay, so if you trace back as to the reason why things started, this fintech disruption started, you can actually trace it to the 2008 financial crisis, where there was a lot of mistrust or trust that was, that disappeared from the financial industry, because the people who were supposed to be watching the financial sector did not do what they were supposed to do. And the people who were entrusted to not lose people's pension funds, their retirement savings, through toxic products like the subprime mortgage and stuff like that, were not ethical, or did not see it as their responsibility to do that, right? So a lot of trust was had been dissipated from the financial sector. So a lot of resentment came out of that, and you have intelligent people like Satoshi Nakamoto and everybody else that followed in the fintech disruption to build applications that went peer-to-peer, rather than to go through a third party or an authority, because simply they did not trust them anymore. Okay, so that's in a nutshell how everything possibly started, at least in my view. This is my assessment. Okay, so digital disruption is also important for the Islamic economy, because Islamic finance is relatively new, at least in modern times, has been properly worked on only in the last 50 or 60 years. Of course, Islamic finance existed in the past, right, in the Ottoman Empire and all that, but in recent times, when the conventional financial system, which is the interest-based system, dominated everything, nobody remembers how the Islamic economy functioned and things like that, right? Apart from historians or people who actually, scholars who actually study it. Okay, so only in the recent 50 years to 60 years is Islamic finance coming with a vengeance, right? Almost like with a vengeance, to offer an alternative to the conventional system, which is largely interest-based, and in that system there are some fundamental flaws that perhaps Islamic finance and Islamic economics principles could actually rectify. Right? So having an alternative system is always good for the consumers or for the market itself, just like having more competitors in a particular market, so that there is no one monopoly where you are subjected to the rules and rules of the game of one particular system. Okay, so today we are discussing essentially the Islamic digital economy and then how technology can be applied to enhance it. Just like technology can enhance the Islamic digital economy, it can also enhance the conventional digital economy, right? So I just had a session yesterday where I was moderating for an MDEC event, where the title was How to Start an Islamic Fintech. So during the run-up in the marketing for this particular event, one of the questions that went unanswered on MDEX page was, what's the difference between an Islamic fintech and a conventional fintech? Okay, so just like, you could possibly pose the same question is, what is the difference between an Islamic digital economy and a conventional digital economy? So the only difference is the Sharia governance portion, which is an additional ethical or values-based, if you want to call it that, or a moral philosophy, if you want to call that, an ethical framework that encompass the rules of behavior within that particular economy, right? So if it's the economy you speak about, you refer it to the ethical framework that governs the economic behaviors. If you talk about a particular function like an Islamic fintech versus a conventional fintech, you can also the same, right? The Sharia is nothing but a set of laws, universal laws, which all other religions also prescribe to some extent, because they are universal laws of cooperation, of justice, or social equality, of transparency, of accountability, things that everybody wants to uphold in different perspectives or understanding of their own religion. So for me, I see this as a governing framework which is meant to produce prescribed behaviors or good behaviors, ethical behaviors, value-based type of behaviors, so that we will have a world that is sustainable, world that is governed, that is fair to everyone, that is that provides justice, that takes care of the poor, the disadvantaged, and those people who can't help themselves. So essentially, this is the main difference between an Islamic system and a conventional system. And not to say that the conventional system is not just or it's not ethical or things like that. This is coming from people who tend to instigate some kind of clash between two systems, but it's not. The way I see it is just two alternative systems that can work together and coexist together, right? Conventional system has some inherent flaws that could be enhanced by perhaps another system which is more tight in terms of its ethical framework. So what do I mean by this? For example, in the conventional system, you have speculative derivative products, right? If you're familiar with finance. So those kind of things like the CDOs and the CDS and the swaps that essentially perpetuated the disaster that happened in 2008. It's still around today, right? So it seems like almost we never learn. Why is it still around today when it was part of the problem? So when you have a tighter, stronger ethical framework in the Islamic system, this kind of products would not have existed because we don't encourage speculative type of behaviors that verge on gambling, right? Because when you are speculating all the time, it's almost like you are in a casino where you are just gambling, right? Very, very close to gambling. Right? So we allow hedging because you can hedge uncertainty. That's not an issue because nobody knows for certain. Nobody can predict what's going to happen tomorrow. So hedging is fine, right? But where do you draw the line between hedging and speculation? So when you have a stronger rules of governance in a system, intuitively you will think that system has something to offer to the current existing system. So what is AI? AI is basically this in a snapshot. You have different what we call as space categories of AI. That means different categories that AI attempts to fix. You have predictive analytics, you have text to speech, which is speech recognition. So not only text to speech, but speech to text, right? So you have Siri on iPhone, you have OK Google for Google, you have Alexa for Amazon, that can recognize speech. So instead of typing into some search bar, you can just say, right, hey Siri, what's the weather like today? Or what's the weather like going to be tomorrow? Should I bring an umbrella? So instead of typing it, you just speak out to Siri and then Siri will respond accordingly. And then you have image recognition, or what we call as computer visioning. For instance, if you walk around the park and then you get bitten by some kind of snake, or you see some kind of berry which you find irresistible to eat, but you want to know whether it's poisonous or the snake that bit you was harmless or poisonous, but you can't describe it, right? So you can't, if you don't know how to describe it, how would you want to type it into the search bar, right? How do you do so? So what you can do is just take a picture and then go to Google, find an image recognition function in Google, and then it will tell you find out what is the type of snake, is it poisonous, how much time you have if it's poisonous before, you become incapacitated and stuff like that, or this berry, is it safe to eat, or is it poisonous and stuff like that. Or maybe simply you just in a flower garden and you want to know what kind of flower because it smells so nice. So these are the applications for computer vision or machine vision or image recognition. Okay. And then if you go down below, you have robotics, which is essentially just automating the human being. And everything that we do in AI is just to replicate the human brain, how we function, its neural network and stuff like that. So intuitively, we also want to replicate how hand grips, how we walk up the stairs, how we play games and and all of that, right? So basically just to replicate another human being, because for various reasons, right? Like NASA is building a robot because it's too costly to lose human lives to send astronauts if something happens. And also when you do repairs in the International Space Station, you have a human being, he needs to be, there's a lot of risk, right? He needs, his spacesuit needs to work properly, he cannot be disconnected, if not he'll float away in space and all that stuff. So if you have a robot in place of a human being, he can do it without having to breathe, and if his hand moves like a human being, he can do whatever repairs in place of the human being. Okay, then we also use it for planning and optimization. We develop AI for expert systems. Expert systems, like for instance, Google bought a company called DeepMind, and DeepMind was a company that built, a very advanced level type of AI, which uses a lot of deep learning, and they built a machine called AlphaGo. So if you remember in 1997, I don't know if some of you have been born, or maybe you're still too young to remember that, IBM built a system that actually built the chess grandmaster, Garry Kasparov, at the game of chess. Right? That machine was called Deep Blue. They built Big Blue a year before in 96, but Big Blue was defeated by Garry Kasparov. So the humanity breathed a sigh of relief. By 1997, the following year, IBM improved Big Blue into a new version called Deep Blue. And Deep Blue actually beat Garry Kasparov at his expert game, right? Chess. So then people got worried about robots taking over humans and all that stuff. Most recently, there's another game called Go, which is highly popular in North Asia or East Asia, in Japan, in China, in Korea. And DeepMind built a machine called AlphaGo. So AlphaGo recently beat the experts at the game Go, and now people are getting worried again about the rapid advancement of artificial intelligence. So if there is what we call this, a documentary on AlphaGo, I would recommend all of you to watch it. Just go to YouTube and then it's there for free. Just type AlphaGo and then watch the entire documentary. I highly recommend it because it gives you the human side of man versus machine. Because man is the being still that built the machine, right? So essentially, it's man versus man. But it gives a very human perspective for those who are new to AI, and you get to fully understand that the people who build machines are also still very human, and it is just the next phase of our evolution. It's nothing more about trying to make machines dominate humans or things like that. That's not the argument, right? You should watch it, and then you get a better understanding of what's going on in the AI space. Okay, and then lastly, we have language processing, or NLP, neuro-linguistic processing, which classifies and translate the speech that we use and we take for granted, right? So everyone, there's a large community in the human race that speaks English, for instance, right? But not every human being speaks English in the same way that every other person speaks. So we have our own accent, we have our own emphasis on certain words, we have our own, tone when we speak, when we're angry, when we're calm, when we are happy, when we're sad, and things like that. So when you build a machine to recognize speech, it is not only to recognize words, it is to differentiate the tone, differentiate the emphasis, differentiate so many things, right? So for a machine to truly understand what we mean and how we are speaking, our sarcasm and whatever, you have to build it that way. So AI has many various forms, right? Advanced form and non-advanced form, and this is how a truly advanced machine has to be built when we look at it. Okay, so what is data analytics? Data analytics is just categorizing this huge amount of data that we have been collecting and then transforming it through some AI algorithms, a bunch of algorithms, whether it's complex or it's simple, to give you a desired outcome, right? So whether it's to project the future, like to project stock market prices if you're in financial analytics, or to predict some kind of emergency or things like that, or to run simulations, for instance, what's the best way to vaccinate the entire population for COVID-19, depending on the obstacles or whatever challenges that you have on hand, rural or urban space, and things like that. So you can use AI for things like that. Okay, what is machine learning? Machine learning is an advanced version of AI. So essentially, it consists of 5 components. You have to define the problem, and then you have to connect it to a data source where it collects all the data. And then you build a model, which is on top of different type of algorithms that define the model. And then you have one additional thing that separates it from AI, which is an optimization algorithm. Optimization algorithm, that means you build the module one time, and then you point it in a direction where as data evolves, it can go to new data sources to optimize its model itself. Right, so that is the wonderful thing about machine learning, where it adapts as new data comes about, and then it teaches itself so that it gives a much better outcome as days go by. You don't have to reprogram it all the time. Okay, and how it does that, it will have to validate and do some iterative type of testing to make sure that it is getting better and not getting worse. Deep learning is the advanced version of machine learning. It works in layers in many neural networks, as we call it, because that's how the brain works. We have many neural networks which through what we call as the brain synapses. So essentially, we are just replicating the human brain, because when things fire all at the same time, right, we don't even think, how our brain fires the muscle to contract, and how to relax or to contract, so that we can grip, hold on to something and things like that. We don't even think about it, right? But these are all the things that's happening, which deep learning and the neural network has to replicate the human brain in order to do what we want it to do. Okay. I'm going quite fast and touching the surface, because it's essentially an hour talk and I can't really go deep into topics like this. I teach part-time at Putra Business School, where I have designed two electives for its MBA program, one called Digital Transformation and another one called FinTech. So I discuss all of this very deeply because it comes from the material that I've gathered as well as from the books that I've written, and I've designed the course that way. So if you're ever interested, you can enroll in such courses or consider to come to Putra Vista School for an MBA and then take those electives that I'm currently teaching. And then if you want to go even deeper, we'll discuss that at the end of this talk, where there are other avenues that you can of course, embark on. Okay, so what is the blockchain? The blockchain is essentially peer-to-peer decentralized public ledger system. As I mentioned, there were people like Satoshi Nakamoto who were disillusioned or started to mistrust the authorities within the financial sector because you essentially did not do what you were supposed to do. So then he said, why should I need to go through a bank to make a transaction, which is a third party? Or why do I need to go through a regulator to entrust them to regulate that the financial industry players are ethical and doing, fanning out the products and services that are safe for the consumers when it didn't happen, right? So he decided to create a system where you go peer-to-peer. That means between the two counterparties, right? Well, why do I need, if I were to buy something from Shafiza, which is the lady, the kind lady that introduced me today, right? If I were to do an exchange, like maybe Shafiza is selling some nasi lemak and I want to buy to her, why do I need to pay through Maybank or CIMB or whatever? He started to create a Bitcoin where I can acquire the Bitcoin and just pay to Shafiza and then get the, in exchange for the Bitcoin, I will get my nasi lemak. Well, why do I need to go through a third-party payment system and things like that? The Bitcoin itself is the peer-to-peer decentralized system, right? So this was the idea of Bitcoin, right, which uses the blockchain as its underlying technology. So what I'm discussing now is the underlying technology, not the Bitcoin. Okay, so how it works is essentially it's a decentralized ledger system. Why it's fantastic is because it is virtually unhackable. Right? Virtually means just the fact that I say it's virtually unhackable, there'll be hackers out there who will try to hack, right? So it is possible to hack it, but it is virtually unhackable because of this. So when you have this system, what happens is when you have a decentralized public ledger system, essentially whatever information is stored within this public ledger, and this public ledger is replicated in different nodes out in the cloud, right? So that means it's not a centralized database. That means like for your bank, right? When you open a bank account in your bank, what happens is that the bank has a centralized database that has all your details. So when you open your bank account, they will ask for your IC, for your address, your race, your whatever, your income, your credit score and whatever. So before they onboard you, right? So if everything's okay, then they say, okay, your account is open, and then you can do whatever you want with your account. So they have all this information in a centralized database. In a decentralized database, what happens is this information is being replicated by nodes out in the cloud, right? And you don't know where the nodes are, right? The reason why you don't know is for the simple fact that it wants to make the system immutable or tamper-proof or unhackable. So if I was a hacker, if I know where the centralized database of the bank is, right? So the only problem now for me is to breach through the security systems of the bank, which is also very difficult to do. But it is a centralized database, only one ledger, one database. But when you have multiple databases, the hacker first has to find how many nodes there are, where they are, and then control more than 51% of them, then it can take over the blockchain. Right. So first of all, you need to know how many nodes there are and then where they are. So when it's up in the cloud, how do you know where it is? It could be in a server in Singapore or in New Zealand or in Australia or in Africa or in North America or in Europe or things like that. So for the hacker itself, right, it is so, for anyone to even think about how to start, right, it's so difficult. That's why the blockchain is like a new phenomenon where it's very interesting in terms of its immutability and tamper-proof characteristics. The other one is it's in scalability, right? But we haven't reach its full scalability because a lot of the blockchain that we use are private blockchain and not public blockchain. Okay, so this is why the blockchain is the talk of the town. So people get confused with the blockchain because there are many use cases of the blockchain. But what happens is, let me now enlighten you by categorizing the types of blockchain first. So like in anything else, when you don't understand, what you do is you categorize the information first. Once you categorize and you understand its different category, then you will be able to get a better understanding. This is the same process that AI programmers do. Right? When you have huge amounts of data, big data, you have structured data and unstructured data, what they do is they start to categorize the data first, then you can start to process it. Okay. So for blockchain, I have simplified to 4 particular categories that the blockchain is being used for today. Number 1 is in cryptocurrency or tokens. So this is where Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, all these different tokens and cryptocurrencies that we know are in this category. So we have about more than 3,000 tokens globally right now. So all of them fall into this category. Okay. Then you have blockchain used as a database or as a registry. Right. You have, and we'll talk more about this in the coming slide. Excuse me. Then you have the third category where blockchain is being used as a payments or remittance system. This one we also call it a tokenized payment or remittance system, where you use the token as a representative of a currency, and then you move the token quite quickly. So this is how you remit or you make payments move faster through a tokenized system. So you replicate it or you store the value onto a token and then you move the token quickly, because the money itself may be restricted by whatever system within the system that you use, which is SWIFT, which is the US-based SWIFT system, right? But if you democratize finance and you don't use the SWIFT system, you use tokenized system that you develop yourself, you can actually remit money much faster, right? Not overnight, not next day, it will be within a few minutes, not even a few hours, okay? But the only things that's slowing it out is regulations, right? The AML and the CTF, which is the anti-money laundering regulations of every country, and the counter-terrorism financing. Technology itself can move it very fast, but it's being slowed down by regulations because of these particular requirements, because finance is a highly regulated industry, okay? And then the last one is the most useful function for Islamic finance specifically, which is using the blockchain as smart contracts. Okay, and we'll go through this in the coming slides. So blockchain as currency or tokens. So cryptocurrencies bear some similarities to regular currency, but unlike regular currency, cryptocurrencies are purely digital assets, and they are blockchain based, of course, supported by cryptography and whatever. So now in blockchain, you have different protocols. You have proof of work, 256, which is what the Bitcoin was built on. And then Ethereum is trying to make it move a little bit faster. So they are building proof of stake. There's also proof of state. So there are new type of protocols even within the blockchain that are being developed, which I don't want to get into because it can get a little bit confusing. From the surface, we'll just talk about the application. So, we take it step by step and, just to um, get a foundational understanding first before you decide to go deeper. Okay, and then anyone can actually issue this kind of currency. Is not regulated. So because they are independently created from central banks, tokens and cryptocurrencies are not legal tender. Okay, but there is a new form of digital currency called CBDC, or central bank issued digital currency, which many central banks are experimenting right now. So that's an interesting space. So now you have a cryptocurrency, or a tokenized system where the central bank is issuing it. So now CBDCs are legal tender, right, and they are guaranteed by the government. Okay, so that's the main difference between independently issued cryptocurrency versus central bank issued sovereign fiat or digital currency. Okay, so very interesting space as we watch and see how different countries will issue their own central bank digital currency. I have a very deep discussion on this in one of my chapters in my recent book, and we'll talk about that at the end of today's class. So essentially, when you look at the definition of money, you have a sovereign fiat currency, which is the paper money. And then you have now the cryptocurrency. Under cryptocurrency, you are divided into alternate coins and tokens. Alternate coins are coins that they are built on their own native blockchain. And then tokens, essentially built on, the Ethereum type of protocol type of tokens, right? So, and then under the different types of tokens, you have equity tokens, hybrid tokens, security tokens, vote tokens, and utility token. So largely of the more than 2,000 tokens that you have in the world, about 80% are all utility tokens. So only 20% form this type of tokens. Right? Just to give you an idea of what's going on in this particular space. And then you have a group called stable coins. So one of the main criticism for cryptocurrency is in its volatility, right? So in end of 2017 or 18, Bitcoin hit its peak, right? About $2,000 or something like that. Oh no, almost $20,000 per Bitcoin. And then after that, when everybody was rushing in, it started to crash, right? It started to crash, went down like to 2,000 or something like that. And then now it's back up to 40,000 or something like that. Right, so this huge extreme volatility. I'm not talking about market volatility. I'm talking about extreme volatility, right? 20,000 to 2,000 to 40,000, right? That's extreme volatility, not market volatility. So the main criticism for cryptocurrencies were that of its volatility. So the easy way to fix its volatility was to peg the cryptocurrency to something more stable, right? Commodities or gold or even sovereign fiat value, right? You can peg it to US dollar or Sing dollar or the euro or renminbi or whatever you want, right? Which is essentially what the central bank issued digital currency will do, right? They issue their own digital currency, which is pegged 1:1 to their sovereign fiat value. And then it will give birth to a new version of digital currency called stable coins. So central bank issued digital currency or CBDCs fall within this stable coin criteria. You can have other tokens like this if you peg it to gold or silver or wheat or flour or whatever you want, right? Hard commodity or soft commodity to oil price or whatever, right? As long as you peg it to some kind of stable commodity or product, it will become you will transform it to a stable coin. Okay, that's the easiest way, simplest way that I can, I can make it simpler for you to understand, right? That's the simplest way to make you understand the different forms of cryptocurrency that you have out there. Okay. So then the other questions that I usually get is that how do you know which cryptocurrency is Sharia compliant or halal or things like that? So because as I've explained, it's so varied and so wide, and it can be used in very different ways and things like that. So the first step before you can jump to the conclusion whether it's halal or not, or Sharia compliant or not, you have to understand how the tokens were designed to be used, right? Then you work backwards, right? Once you understand which category it falls in, right? Whether it's a utility or it's a security or it's an equity or it's a hybrid or whatsoever, then you can apply the Sharia framework to it, right? Once you understand how it was designed and what what it was meant to do, right? Then you work backwards. Okay, is it a store of value? Is it just a means of exchange? Because equity token, that means it's almost it's an equity, right? It's an equity based asset, right? So when it's an equity based asset token, the Sharia rules that apply to equity can be applied to this particular token, for instance, right? So if it's a means of exchange, the Sharia rules on means of exchange, like for currency, will apply to it. So I can't give you a blanket fatwa by saying, oh, all currencies are halal, all currencies are haram. It doesn't make sense, right? No fatwa should be given in that sense, because the function is all very different, right? So when you understand how different it is, then you understand there is no blanket fatwa that can be given for the entire universe of cryptocurrency. Okay, that's the simple answer to whether cryptocurrencies are halal or not. Okay, the next one is blockchain as a database and as a public registry. You have countries like Honduras have adopted blockchain for its land registry. So in Malaysia, your Jabatan Hartanah, that monitors each parcel of land, who is the rightful owner and all that, can even think about using the blockchain so that there is no double claim, or no one can hack into the system and then put their name as the rightful owner when this person is actually the rightful owner in a blockchainized system, because it's immutable and tamper-proof. Right? Because of this quality, Honduras has adopted blockchain for its land registry. Isle of Man has adopted this system for the registry of companies. And then there's another company called Everledger that has created a blockchain system to monitor diamonds. Right? It started with diamonds, but now they have expanded their application for luxury goods like work of arts or antiques and things like that, because the blockchain is so tamper-proof. Okay. So this is the encryption key to unlock if you want to check who's the rightful owner and things like that. Okay. And then the third one was the payment system, or at the central bank level, between the tier 1 banks and the central bank, is what the payment system is, what we call as the clearing and settlement of transaction. Right? The smaller banks are called the tier 2 or tier 3 banks, right? So the truly huge banks, they transact directly with the central banks of each country, and then they do the settlement every day, right? The deposits and the what do you call this, withdrawals, right? So every day the transaction has to be balanced, right? To balance your books every single day, right? This is how blockchain can be used as a payment system to make it more efficient, with less errors and more real time and things like that. So in a typical current system, you have about 20% errors. But when you use AI-driven or a blockchain, or both an AI-driven with a blockchainized system together here, right? AI and blockchain, you put it together, you have a more efficient settlement of transaction and processing. And in the latest chapter of my book, in fact, in both books that I've written, I've discussed parts of it about more detail in the most recent book in one of the chapters as well. If you want to read more about it, you can buy the books, and later I will show you how to, what are the titles of the book and how to access to it. Just for your own information, you don't. This is not a plug for me to sell my books, but just to explain to you where you can read it further for better understanding. And then the last application of the blockchain, as we mentioned, is the smart contract. Right? So it's essentially someone has to build the smart contract platform, and then you have two counterparties. They get onto the platform. They write essentially a contract between themselves onto this system, online platform, and then the terms and conditions are recorded as a self-automable or an algorithm that can self-execute. So this terms and conditions will be codified into some kind of algorithm, and then after that, when the contract is agreed and executed, it goes to the cloud and then executed. Okay. So essentially, smart contracts are programmable contracts which will self-execute the stipulations of an agreement. When predetermined conditions are triggered, they are automable and enforceable, more efficient and economical with fewer errors, delays, and disputes. So for instance, if I were to buy, let's say again, Shafiza, has maybe she runs a coffee business, and then I want to order bags of coffee in 10 kilogram bags or something like that. So I get into this smart contract platform which somebody has created, and then I make the order, and then Shafiza receives the order, and then she says whether she can do 10 kg bags, if not 5 kg bags, and then when she can deliver and what's the price, blah blah blah. So once we agree, we write a smart contract, and then it gets executed. So Shafiza says that, okay, once you deposit 20%, then you will execute the contract. Then I will start preparing. No deposit, the contract is still floating or hanging in the cloud, right? So I take out my mobile phone and I transfer 20% to her company account or her bank account, whatever account that she wants me to. Once she receives the 20%, the smart contract is executed. Right? So then she starts to prepare 10 kilogram bags of coffee. On the agreed upon delivery date, she ships it over. Right? And then the trucks come to my warehouse. My warehouse guy will scan through IoT, Internet of Things devices, RFID or scanning or NFC or whatever IoT device that I have in my warehouse. I scan. I have received all the goods. All the 10 kilograms are good, no broken, nothing. I receive. So what happens is I have to pay her the balance 80%. Right. So once the inspection of the goods are okay, I will remit her the rest of the 80%. Once she receives 100%, contract finish and end. The smart contract ends and then finish. Right. So that's a simple way of understanding how the smart contract works. Okie dokie. So that is what the blockchain is about. Okay. So now what happens is we will talk about the applications in the real world. The first application that we are going to speak about is in the asset and wealth management or portfolio management, if you want to call it another way. So if you see the top row here, this is functions that is taken care of the blockchain, right? So this is the so-called blockchain. So blockchain will take care of the AML, CTF, and KYC. So anti-money laundering, counter-terrorism financing regulations, and the KYC, which is the know your client regulations. Everything that the regulator wants the financial institution to abide by can be recorded on the blockchain and then easily reported for auditing purposes. And then because of the tokenized system, banking and money movement is also made faster on the along the blockchain. You can also manage the client portfolio much better. And then, of course, related to this, auditing and regulatory reporting will be much easier because everything is recorded. And because it's tamper-proof, the regulators will believe whatever they see because there's no way that that someone is changing the information the way it's recorded. Okay, and then the bottom part is where AI comes in. You can have an AI-driven portfolio management, which is dynamic. So when the economy is in recession, you automatically move in terms of robo-advisory applications, right? You move the portfolio to more bonds and cash and things like that. As the economy gets better, you start to liquidate from bonds and cash, and you move into equities and things like that to optimize the ROI. Okay. And then, of course, with AI, you can understand the consumer better and then customize the services that you provide for them. So when you put this together, it can be a very powerful system for asset and wealth management. Okay. So the next application that we're looking at is in supply chain. By the way, all these applications are discussed in very much detail. Every application discussed as individual chapters in my latest book, if you want to read about it more. So essentially, in a network of supply chain is very complex. You have so many people, exporters bank, export customs, forwarder, port, carrier, import port, import customs, import bank, importer, and then the whole slew of suppliers and suppliers and sub suppliers, right? So it's a very intricate network of supply chain. We are very far away from getting all of this blockchainized, but we can do it by one layer at a time. And the benefit is so many. For instance, just like this pandemic, right? So it is attributed to some, disease that started off consuming bats or whatsoever, right? So you now have different parties denying it. Some parties saying that's for sure, and whatever, right? So whatever it is, right? So let's say I believe that it was from the bats, right? So right now, if that entire supply chain was actually on the blockchain, what I could have done was to just track the blockchain, because it has an immutable record of every block, right? Every step of the way when the supply chain moves, right? I can track where the first incidence was. And once I can track the source or the first incidence was, I can narrow down the source, and then I can clean up that particular area. For instance, the bird flu, right? Right now, if there was a bird flu outbreak, like we did in the past, we just determine which farm it was, and then we kill the entire chicken farm. And so can you imagine the chicken farmer, right? You will devastate and destroy him. Because there may be chickens in that farm that were not affected, right? But because we don't know which chickens, we can't possibly test 1,000 or 10,000 chickens, right? So to protect the human species, we destroy that 10,000 chickens farm for the safety of others. But if it was blockchainized, you could actually narrow down to a small section within the farm, which is probably maybe about 50 or 20 chickens. And then you destroy those chickens while you save the other chickens that were not affected. So this is one very clear example of when you have a truly blockchainized, a traceable type of supply chain. Okay, and then since we're talking about the Islamic economy, there's an additional requirement for it to be halal, and if you have a blockchainized system, you can essentially track whether it is truly halal through the entire system, which is from farm to fork, right? From the farm to the dinner table, right? You can track the entire system, okay, including the sub-processes to prepare the halal, to adhere to the halal regulations and things like that. And then this is Islamic trade finance, which is related to supply chain, because the finance that supports the supply chain is the trade finance or the supply chain finance. So this is how you can connect it to the different blockchains with the blockchainized payment system, with smart contract within everybody. And then you can make things faster and, make settlement faster. Of course, you can't deliver faster, because if you are delivering through ships, right, you take maybe still, 90 days or 10 days or 20 days to settle. But in terms of blockchain payments, you settle it within few hours. But delivery of the good itself will still have to go through customs and, the distance and all that stuff, right? But in terms of digitally improving the process, there's so much, potential. Okay, I know it's 4 o'clock. It's already 1 hour. Let me just quickly finish up, and then I will open the session for Q&A. Of course, in the Islamic finance area, sukuk is the huge component of it. So this is the old way of us, issuing a sukuk. Process takes about 3 to 4 months because we need to have the structure approval, and then if it's Sharia compliant, you have to have the Sharia approval. Then you have to do the bond rating or the sukuk rating, and then you have to submit a prospectus to the Securities Commission, and then you have to create the prospectus or the information memorandum, which involves all these guys in the white boxes. Then the issuer can issue it to the primary subscriber or the primary institutional investors. And then if the subscription is not enough, then you go to the secondary market to tap into the retail investors. But in a blockchainized system, you basically make the system so efficient in this sense, right? This is the Ethereum logo. Based on the Ethereum protocol, you can actually issue a blockchain-based sukuk and then apply AI to make it even much better. And then you can issue it onto the crypto exchange for liquidity. Okay, and then for takaful, for insurance, you can improve the claims processing. Right now, our claims process, I don't know if you have gotten into any accident for your motor insurance. Depending on the severity of your accident, it can take from 3 months to a year or even more than 1 year. Because, there's dispute all the time, the adjuster, the user, the garage is your workshop. And then the between different insurers, they ding dong and they deny and they go back and forth. That's why your claims are delayed. But on a system where everything is transparent, there is no denying and there's no claims, right? Everything is trustable and everything is one version of truth. You will make the claims much faster. And you can read that more about in one of the chapters in my book. Essentially, what you will do is, this is the old way, 100% of the time, 100% of the time, 100% cost, 100% of the time. If you use a blockchain AI-driven system, you will save 70% of the time and 80% of the cost. Okay, this is the benefits of moving towards digital transformation. And then you can also improve your wasiat, since we're talking about Islamic economy. For the conventional, we're talking about wills, estates, and trusts. When you have a blockchainized, everything is on a smart contract. There is no double claim. Everything executes, very quickly and according to the wishes of the testator. That means the person who wrote the will. Also, in the chapter, you can read more because we discuss wasiat, wakaf, and zakat together in one chapter, where in a digital system, everything will be much more efficient, with more accountability and less leakages of public finance. So for zakat specifically, right, zakat needs to go to only of these 8 beneficiaries. So when you have a blockchainized system, you can determine that it only goes to these 8 beneficiaries and not other people who do not qualify. Other people in the charitable organization, in Islamic charitable organizations, are sadaqah and infaq. That one you can go to for other people. But zakat money only goes to these 8 particular beneficiaries because it is written so in the Quran to benefit this most disadvantaged individuals because of their circumstance or because of their condition. Okay. So the current limitations that we have in technology is essentially technical challenges because technology is still evolving. It is just limited by our imagination, how we want to conceive the application. And then business challenges because some business leaders, especially the older folks, right, or the non-technical guys, they just don't understand how AI and blockchain can benefit their business, so they are resistant. They are also under pressure to hold the old jobs and not create new jobs, right? So it becomes a challenge for them. But actually, it's quite easy to fix. It's just that they need to understand technology and the evolution of new jobs. right? So employment won't be a factor. It's just that the workers need to evolve and be trained in the higher value jobs. The mundane jobs will be taken over by robots, right? You don't need a thinking human to carry one stuff, to sort mail and to sort Shopee orders and things like that. That one you can use a robot to do it very quickly through RFID and barcode scanning. That one is very easy. The human being is meant to do higher value jobs, right? There's thinking, those data analytics, those kind of producing the kind of insights which robots cannot do at this moment. Okay, and then of course the main obstruction is always the regulations, right? If you talk to any startup founder or anybody who is dealing with regulations, this is the main stumbling block, because the regulators are just not keeping up with the program. Okay, this is the reality worldwide, not only in Malaysia or Singapore or whatever. It's a worldwide problem. And then of course privacy issues in PDPA, right? When you have so much of your own data that is being analyzed to provide personalized service, the other problem that comes with the other side of the coin is that you will have a lot of your private data which you don't know is being collected about you, right? So it's an inherent problem that we need to decide where we want to go forward. Okay, and privacy is also a part of the regulations. The PDPA, right, Privacy Declaration Act, or Personal Data Privacy Act, or whatever you call it here in Asia, and then in Europe they have a different name for it. Right, these two are also quite linked when it comes to privacy. So the conclusion is we need to adopt digitally. It's not an option anymore, right? It's not a if, right? It's a when, right? So if you don't adopt it, you'll be left behind. That's just the way it is. Moving forward is to learn it. Once you understand it, you don't fear it, and it will put you in a position where you will become valuable in today's economy. Okay, so these are the books that I've written that you can look at if you want to. This was the first book on fintech that I wrote. In fact, this was the first book ever written on Islamic fintech, of technology and Islamic finance, the first ever book in 2018. This was the first edition. I'm working now. The publisher is working with us now, with my co-author, to work on the second edition. So we are updating the content, and there will be 2 new chapters that we'll be adding to the second edition. So look out for that. It should be ready by end of this year, or it should be formally published by the end of this year or early next year. So look out for that. And then this is the most recent book that I wrote on my own, because before, when I wrote this, this was actually to clarify blockchain and all of that. And then after this was clarified, people got stuck within fintech, and nobody talked beyond fintech. Right? Always, fintech is finance, right? Always talking about technology and finance, right? But in the entire economic ecosystem, finance is only one small portion of, albeit it supports, it provides capital and supports the other sectors of the economy, but it's still only one sector of the economy. So I wanted to expand the conversation beyond finance. So hence the title of this. And then there are chapters that are still on finance, but there are also chapters on medical, healthcare, cyber physical systems, digital twins, cyber physical systems for manufacturing. Because manufacturing is a huge sector which is important for any nation, because that makes the nation a producer. Right? Once you are a producer of a certain product, you become very valuable to the economy. So we need to be producing real products, whether it's services or products. Right? You need to be the producer, not only the consumer. Right? That way is how nations generate wealth, right? In the efficient use of labor, capital, and everything else that you learn in economics, right? So that discussion on manufacturing and cyber physical systems is something that I have not seen in a lot of the writings. So, if you want to help your economy, you should be thinking about producing services and products and things like that. I think this is something that is lacking, right? Rather than you are, arguing about the foolishness of arguing about cryptocurrencies and the DeFi movement and all of that stuff, right? You need to be producing stuff instead of wasting your time, discussing about things that doesn't bring any of real value, right? That impacts the GDP and the wealth of your nation, right? We should be thinking about more productive ends to help ourselves. Okay. And then, of course, the last two chapters, I talk about RegTech as well as SupTech. The difference between RegTech and SupTech is RegTech is technology that you use, that financial institutions use to comply to the regulations that are imposed on them by the regulators. And SupTech is the technology that market regulators can use to ensure that the people that they are trying to regulate actually comply to their regulations. Okay, so this book is on Amazon, on Kobo. If you're the Rakuten kind of guy, you can find it online everywhere, anywhere. And this is the price. But if you want a special price for an autograph copy by me, you can take down my, my official email address, and then we can take it from there. Then, of course, if you want to be professionally certified in Islamic FinTech, there is a program that I'm working with a company called iFintel. I'm also their head of technology, along with 5 other trainers who are Python and R trainer and sentiment analysis expert, predictive analytic experts. I'm the conceptual and application expert. So together we run this professional certification program, which is certified by USM. And then for more inquiries, you can take down this email and write to them to provide you more information. It's an 8-week program, total of 56 hours done typically on the weekends at night. And then this will professionally certify you to be an expert in Islamic FinTech. There's other programs for financial analytics and things like that. Please write to them if you want to know more. I think that's the end of my time. And because I want to open the floor for questions. Shafiza, back to you. Sorry, I ran a little bit long because maybe I was over explaining stuff.
Yeah, I understand that. Thank you to Dr. Haziq Mohammed for such a very fruitful discussion about artificial intelligence and blockchain. And then, Doctor, can we proceed to our Q&A session? Okay, as you can see at the chat box, because there's a few questions, and do you want to read it by yourself or you want me to read it for you?
Yes, Shafiza, can you pick the questions and you read it out to me so that I can just respond? That it will be faster there.
Okay, so this is a question from Anik. He said that his field is human resource management. So he wants to know whether they can use AI and blockchain to effectively manage employees at workplace.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
So Anik field is a HRM.
Okay.
Human resource management, and then he wants to know whether they can use AI and blockchain to effectively manage the employees at workplace.
Yes. There are enterprise solutions that are already available. I'm not sure to what extent, how much blockchain they have used in the enterprise solution, because I wasn't the creator. It's just my observation. But definitely they use a lot of AI. That means a lot of algorithm within the enterprise solution that can do the function of what HR department requires, like leave application, clock in and clock out, overtime claims, leave claims, and monitoring of even some level of human resource performance. So there are already some enterprise solutions that are available out there. Anik, if you would, if you Google it and you make some inquiries, you should be able. You should be able to know that there are already applications out there. Okay.
And then the extension from the question is, can leadership be merged with such technology to make effective decisions in organization?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of business leaders today rely on business intelligence analytics. So what they do is there is an AI module or system that either they develop themselves or they buy as an enterprise solution, which actually monitors their operational efficiency, which also maybe even monitors the decisions that they have made in the past, whether it's related to their supply chain or to their, the amount of loans that they are taking or their production flow or things like that. So what happens is they have a business analytics platform, which has a business intelligence dashboard. And then from the analytics, it gives them insights into the business, into their own business. And in that sense, the insights will guide them in their next business decisions that they want to make. It helps them see their business for what it really is, instead of having a favorite department manager always showing them results, but actually in their own independent business analytics, it's not actually moving that much, right? So they can keep and then also within their business, they have what we call as WIP, work in progress projects. So from the business insights, you can tell which WIP, work in progress projects, are effective and which are not.
Mm-hmm.
So how the leader can use this kind of information is that when it is not effective, it's not meeting the KPI, you drop them, right? You drop the project, and then those projects that are working very well, you can use those insights to further come up with new projects or maximize the profit in that sense.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. And then I'm moving to the second question. What are the future cryptocurrency? Are they going to replace the current currency? This is from Badir.
Right. So I think in chapter 9 in my Beyond FinTech book, I had a huge discussion on central bank digital currency. So in the CBDC or the stable coin version of a cryptocurrency, which is central bank issued, so it's legal tender.
Mm-hmm.
There are 4 different formats that I talked about. One of them was as a replacement for cash. So my analysis was that there is a place for everyone, right? So there will be a place in our economy for cryptocurrencies or the DeFi movement. DeFi is a DEFI, which is decentralized finance, right? The reason why it's a play on words, right? DeFi, that means you want to defy the authorities, right? So go peer to peer. So that's why they put it that way, right? But it's DEFI. So the decentralized finance movement, everything is tokenized and everything is using cryptocurrency. So there is a place for everyone. There will be a place for cash. There will be a place for cryptocurrency. There will be a place for sovereign fiat. There will be a place for other forms of digital currency and all of this. It just means that cash will shrink a little bit. If you look at Sweden, the country Sweden, the use of cash or sovereign fiat has shrunk over the last decade, simply because they have issued their own digital currency and people are adopting that way. You have China, which is the world's largest economy, and they are going through an experiment where they're issuing digital yuan, right? So in 4 of their major cities, one of them is Chengdu, and then I forget the other 3 because I'm not a Mandarin speaker, so it's very hard for me to remember the different names, right? So anyway, it's 4 major cities. They're working with their 3 largest state-owned bank and 2 telcos and with other MNCs like Starbucks, McDonald's, and whatever. So they're slowly rolling it out. It's a beta phase for 1 year. If it's good, it was just for domestic purposes. If it's good, they will begin to expand. And then over the course of several years, it may even go, regional and global and whatever. Why I mentioned digital yuan specifically, although we have about 57 central banks experimenting on their own digital currency. Why I mentioned digital yuan is because the thing that is different between China and everybody else is that China is also building their Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI, we call it for short, right? So when you build a global Belt and Road Initiative, which is not only through the landlocked regions, through Central Asia, and then it goes to Europe, but also to the, to the sea-bound route, right? The Sea Silk Route, they call it, right? Down to Southeast Asia, to the Indian Ocean, and then to Africa. Right? They have been building this Belt and Road Initiative over past decade, right? So why digital yuan is of special mention is that I can already foresee, it is interesting in my observation that in the coming years, right, if the domestic experimentation of the digital yuan becomes successful, which I think for most countries, it will be, they will be successful in their own right, right? So China will also be successful. It's just a matter of time. And then when it goes regional and international, right? What China has that other countries do not have is the Belt and Road Initiative. So when they dominate trade in that sense, right, dominate more than the US, that's why you have this trade war between China and the US, right? What will happen that I foresee is that when they introduce the digital yuan, right, in terms of settlement of payments and things like that, right, and then it will solve, international finance risk, credit risk, and currency risk, right? So this is very important and interesting space that I'm watching personally. And then more interestingly is to see how the other big nations like the US and the EU will respond when they see this happening. Okay, you will see a lot of, it will affect the politics of the world, it will affect the trade of the world, it will affect a lot of things. So this is one of the many things that I'm looking at rather than the foolish discussions that's happening in cryptocurrency and everything else, like that. I think a more to understand the world that you live in, right? Because we are living in a world which is not idealistic, right? Human beings are created, to be the best and also to be the worst. So to live in a world that is realistic is to look at the human being in both sense of the word, right? So you have to understand that the world as it evolves, so that you can position yourself in a way that you can, benefit out of it, or you can be in a position to help other people the most, right? So before all of that, you have to be able to function where you can understand the world that's around you. So these are the maybe some of the pointers that is interesting to me, which I just want to share with the audience today, so that you are aware of things as they transpire around you, right? It's not meant to belittle that, you can have this other discussions within cryptocurrency and all that. So I don't mean to belittle that. What I'm trying to say is there may be for you to consider other more important things that are going around the world that may be useful for you to think about and to analyze. Please, next question. Shafiza. Sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry. Okay, so the third question from Amir. Why Bitcoin is much more popular, and what are the weaknesses in other cryptocurrencies?
I think Bitcoin is popular because it was the first. Just like in, if you're in marketing or in economics, you understand that the first to market, the guy who's first to market always has the majority of the market share. And then Bitcoin also recently had the support of Elon Musk. He bought, I think, 1.5 billion worth of Bitcoins so that people can buy his Tesla cars with Bitcoin. He started accepting exchange with Bitcoin, not only normal cash, right? So and then Visa came out with this Bitcoin program where they will also process Bitcoin, any payments through Bitcoin. So when you have huge support from people like that, your value goes up, right? The hype goes up, and then the value goes up, and then all these hyped up investors will put money into that, and that's why the value is at 40,000 or exceeding 40,000. And then the dominance of Bitcoin or the traction for holding Bitcoin is much more. So yeah, that's the only reason why. In terms of transactional speed, the Bitcoin POW 256 is much slower. To give you a sense of much slower, Visa processes transaction at 100,000 or more than 100,000 transactions per second. Bitcoin can only process 6 to 7 transactions per second. So that's how slow the POW 256 is. That's why Ethereum wants to create the Ethereum 2.0, which will be about as fast as Visa and MasterCard. Next question, please.
Okay, so next question from Azhar Isham. He mentioned that blockchain lacks a feature that make distributed computing system among organization or corporation, unless there is a mutual assistant for each one of them. I don't really understand, so maybe Azhar Isham, can you explain more to Doctor? Is there any Azhar Ishams here?
Hi, Doctor. It's an honor to join your session.
Thank you for coming.
Okay, I suppose blockchain should feature as a distributed ledger.
Yes.
And it needs to be, it needs to obtain consent from each respective organization in order to merge.
It is a consensus driven system, yes. Can you proceed with your question, because there's various levels to this?
Okay, if I may come up with a specific example. So okay, we are talking about Maybank, Public Bank, and CIMB.
Okay.
So we are talking about distributed network or distributed system. So unless each member of the system provide access to that particular blockchain, then is a go-go. If it is not, it is a no-go. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, so okay, now the lack of understanding is and it's not part of your fault, because when you go into deeper discussion, I would have explained this in my classes or in the books or in the professional certification program. So there is two types of blockchain, which is the private blockchain and the public blockchain. So the theoretical explanation that I did for this particular session was the fully public decentralized blockchain system, right? So in a private blockchain, you actually define the nodes. That means instead of being anonymous and out in the cloud and don't know where it is, I actually define a certain entity as the node, right? In that sense, the node has to be part of the consensus system to give permission for you to write on the next block of the blockchain, right? So for a integrated system that you want to integrate the different banks, I think that is not, my feeling is that is not the direction of integration between banks is going to go, right? I think one of the formats of CBDC as an interbank payment system is most likely one of the format. So what that happens is that the central bank will be the main settlement blockchainized system, right? So then every payment system out there, including banks and fintech companies, will have direct access to the central bank in order to settle the payments. So I would highly urge you to buy my Beyond FinTech book, and in one of the chapter, I have a very in-depth discussion on that. Then you will understand, how a fully decentralized blockchainized payment system can work. Right now, in this short session, is very, very difficult because there are many theoretical gaps in your understanding for me to give you a complete answer. I'm just so sorry because it's not an easy topic, so you have to go through step by step to fill up the gaps, and then we can talk about the full application. But I don't see any application where you will connect or maybe I'm not understanding what you mean by connecting CIMB, Maybank, and Public Bank.
Actually, blockchain topic excites me, Doctor, because I'm narrowing down into Islamic finance perspective. Yeah. But the bigger picture is that we are talking about government bodies. So we are talking about single entry. So if they say they go to JPN, so they need to key in. They go to immigration, they need to key in. But we are talking about one entry, but then single database. So that's what my understanding about blockchain all about. But as per your suggestion, that I should buy your book, I will do so, inshallah, in order to deepen my understanding. Thank you so very much, Doctor.
Okay, no problem. Okay, I think now I understand what he's trying to say. So for the question of scalability, right? Scalability, that means the only way for us to fully benefit in terms of efficiency of operations and processes, right, is to have every entity to be connected, right? So ultimately this will happen, but it will take, I think maybe between 5. I shouldn't. It depends on whether you're an advanced economy or you're emerging or a developing economy, right? So it probably take about a decade, depending on where you, which type of economy you are, right? Because in order for blockchain to be scalable, every entity, right, like the customs department, the government agency, the private sector, need to be integrated, right, or what we call as interoperable, right? So when you have different systems trying to be connected to each other, right? Right now, what enterprise solutions do is that they use an API, which is an application program interface, right? So you have two different systems, right? One can be SAP and one can be IBM or Microsoft, and then you can API and then they can work together, right? So likewise, in the blockchainized system, you can actually also do that. So you have independent private blockchain systems, and then you will connect them together, then they will become semi-private. And then when you have more of this getting connected, it will become more and more public, right? Then it will lead towards a fully decentralized public ledger system where everything is integrated and everything is interoperable. But as of today, I don't see it happening until probably the next decade, because right now we don't have the infrastructure. At the application level, we are building private type of blockchain at corporation or corporate level to benefit from efficiency within the organization, right? And then what will happen is that different organizations will start to integrate when they are ready, right? Because some organizations are already advanced level of tech implementation. Some are just starting, right? So once everyone is ready and they start to think that, okay, the best for us to become even more efficient, let's start to work together and connect our systems together. Once they are ready to do that, then you will start to see the full promise or the true promise of the blockchain's scalability ability. So eventually this will happen, but I don't see this happening until the next decade.
Okay, Dr. So now it's 4:35. So would you like to attend one more question?
Sure, I'm okay.
Okay, okay, okay. So I think this is the last question that I will read. So before that, I would like to remind the participants to fill up the attendance and e-certificate form, okay, for your participation. And then after this question, we will have a photography session. Okay, so get ready after Dr. Haziq answer the last question, which is from Muhammad Imtiaz. How can blockchain and AI enhance the organizational and supply chain sustainability rather than creating disruption?
Okay. If I understand the question, supply chain sustainability instead of disrupting it. Okay. I sense that the questioner thinks that disruption is a bad thing. Okay, maybe I would like to say something like this, right? Disruption is not necessarily a bad thing. Actually, disruption is a good thing when the existing system is not functioning optimally, right? So when you have built a particular system, and then you see that actually this system can be performing better, right? So you start to think of different ways of making the system better. It's almost like when you drive a car, and this car, you feel like the internal could be a little bit more ergonomic, could be more comfortable, following the way someone normally sits, or the way someone puts their hands on the wheel, the way the car moves in terms of speed, in terms of wind resistance. Less wind resistance means less fuel consumption, and things like that, to make it more aerodynamic outside, ergonomic inside, and things like that, to use less fuel, to maybe integrate solar panel and all that stuff. So there is a shift of thinking, right? The paradigm shift of thinking. So this shift of thinking is what how we can view digital disruption, right? So the supply chain is a highly complex and a network of suppliers getting the buyers what they want, right? So right now you have a lot of companies that instead of building everything themselves, what they do is they outsource, right? So they outsource the parts which they are not profitable to them, and then just focus on the things that are very profitable for them, right? So a simple supply chain network last time has now become so complicated because that former supplier now has maybe 10 sub-suppliers. And then they don't even know that their sub-suppliers have sub-sub-suppliers. And their sub-sub-suppliers have sub-sub-sub-sub-suppliers. So once you see this network of suppliers go down, right, then you can imagine how complex a supply chain has become, right? So the use of AI and blockchain in supply chain is not meant to reduce the complexity, because the nature of trade depends on profitability and profit margins and things like that. So if they want to have 10 or 50 or 100 sub-suppliers, right, technology cannot prevent that. Right? That is their choice. That is a human business decision. They can have 50, they can 150, they can have 500 suppliers. It's up to them, right? As long as they can manage the cost. What I'm introducing here in terms of technology for AI and blockchain is that all of these suppliers are being tracked through the blockchain, that when something happens, you can actually trace where this particular part or food comes from, right? So let's say this guy has 551 sub-suppliers. So when there is bird flu or mad cow disease outbreak, and I track through this supplier, and then this guy says that, I have 551 sub-suppliers, right? So if everything is tracked onto the blockchain, what I can do is I just follow the trace of the blockchain, and then I can narrow down from the 551 sub-suppliers that only one of the supplier is the culprit, is the one that caused the bird flu or mad cow disease because of sanitary reason, or the ground was infected by some disease or whatsoever, right? Instead of shutting down the guy with the 551 sub-suppliers. You know what I'm saying? So this is the value that technology can bring in, instead of, from what I gather of your question, is to reduce or disrupt the number of the supply chain network. Okay, I hope I have answered that question, because that's the way I understood it.
So I think that's we'll wrap up our Q&A session for today's topic about blockchain and AI. Very interesting, because this is my first time attending a professional talk about this. And then now we will have our photography session. So I would like everyone to turn on your camera, and then click on. So I'm going to take, wait. Okay, so there's 3 pages of participants. So I will take 3 times. So just smile in front of your camera, and then ready. 1, 2, 3. Okay, second group, smile, 1, 2, 3. And then the last group, smile, 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's it. Okay, to all, to Dr. Haziq Mohammed, thank you for spending your time today with us. We are very pleased to have you, and then we learned a lot. And I would like to thank the participant as well for your time, and then ask question, and I learned a lot today. I hope you guys too. And then you have anything to say, Doctor, before we leave?
Thank you very much for the Graduate Student Club for inviting me. I'm honored to be here to be sharing a little bit of my knowledge with you, and I hope that it has all been useful for you, and all the best in your studies as well as in your career. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.